Jake Paul faced the former UFC middleweight kingpin in his last bout, ultimately defeating the legend with a unanimous decision. And let's say the fighting world was in quite a frenzy, with accusations of rigged fights circulating everywhere. But Joe Rogan turned down these assumptions. The most notable commentator, Joe Rogan, broke down the Silva vs. Paul bout punch by punch on his podcast and gave us his verdict. Rogan thinks when Silva moved forward, things took a wrong turn for the legend. Paul's sort of stepping jab caught him right on the chin, making Silva fall backward. But then the Spider leans away from the right hand, ultimately going down. Rogan noted the 47-year-old was down from the punch. He even cleared the air by mentioning that Paul's right hand didn't cause the destruction. It was his left hand that did the work. The famous combat sports commentator didn't stop there. Rogan had some good words for the problem child himself. First, he thinks the YouTuber turned boxer hits hard and can cook up some pretty good punches. Secondly, the commentator made it clear that Paul being a YouTube star has nothing to do with his credibility as a boxer. No one's saying he's the best in the world, but the 26-year-old keeps improving. You can clearly see it from Paul's performance, right? Rogan also thinks social media users need to take a break on the Paul hate train. If Rogan is telling us Paul's legit, then he sure is, guys. No questions asked. I mean, Paul was a solid favorite in the betting odds already, but I gotta say, this bout sure caused some chaos. Fighters like Terrence McKinney thought this win wasn't a surprise because Jake was pretty impressive that night, but the 28-year-old made it clear that Silva's still the GOAT. Rightfully said, he's 47 years old and still looks great. I second you, McKinney. Of course, while some appreciated Paul, others thought it was the perfect opportunity to hate on Dana. Take Derek Brunson, for example. He claimed UFC president Dana White must be out there somewhere, breaking his 300-inch TV after Paul's win. Burn. You thought Brunson stopped there, didn't you? His tweets kept coming and coming, and I assure you, this was his last on Paul vs. Silva, stating that all the boxers might let Paul be Boxer of the Year. You've got to love this guy. While Adrian Yanez was bummed over the former UFC middleweight kingpin's loss, he was glad it wasn't by KO. We all have to agree that both sides put up a great fight. It was a back-and-forth affair until the fight's final round, but the problem child sneakily added another knockdown, making it easier for the judges to finalize a verdict. And we saw that it was in Paul's favor, and he earned it. Even Ryan Garcia was all praise for the YouTuber turned boxer. Garcia claimed Paul's fight against Silva was his best yet, and that his condition had improved since the Woodley fight. It sure did. The problem child silenced all his doubters and the netizens with his last win. His record is now 6-0, and we're all here for it. Bilal Muhammad stated that Jake worked extremely hard before facing the legend Silva. After all, he returned to the ring after nearly a year away. He last fought against former UFC champion Tyron Woodley, taking a wild knockout, so he surely had the time on his hands to train himself up for this big fight. Luis and Angel Feliciano also had to give their 2 cents. He thinks the dude has some NyQuil in his right hand. Guess which younger Paul sibling has magical hands? It was obviously a dig at the YouTuber turned boxer, but I must admit, it sure was funny. Or Cornelius Bunderidge, on the other hand, thinks the younger Paul brother is good for the sport of boxing. I mean, he's bringing a new crop of young fans, and it'll make a big impact on the world of boxing. But one thing's clear, Paul Boy can't rest. He's already planning out his future bouts, and the man's got big names in his mind. The 26-year-old called out former UFC fighter Nate Diaz and boxing legend Canelo Alvarez as potential opponents. Surprisingly, Diaz supported his teammate Chris Avila, who won a unanimous decision over Dr. Mike. You all thought Paul was bluffing when he called out Diaz. Well, you thought wrong. He's surely serious. He even signed his PFL deal, and guess what he did after that? He proposed a boxing match with Nate Diaz. That's right, the younger Paul sibling just signed a multi-year deal with the PFL to fight in MMA, and he already has his first target set, Nate Diaz. The 25-year-old just turned another page in his fighting career by signing with the UFC's rival PFL. Paul aims to compete in Super Fight in 2023, a newly formed division. The YouTuber turned boxer has never shied away from criticizing the paychecks UFC fighters get, and now he's on to greater things. Paul's set to shake things up with his super fight division. The YouTuber turned boxer mentions that he'll make sure PFL is the best place in the world for fighters and will be deeply involved. Paul also said that the UFC never allows fighters to monetize their sponsorship deals, and with this division, a partnership will be formed that would enable fighters to do so. He has no fights lined up for 2023 yet, but he has wanted a one-on-one with likely future Hall of Famer Nate Diaz. A few moments ago, the one-time UFC lightweight title challenger Diaz was removed from the UFC roster. Diaz is now free from his UFC contract and can do what he wants in free agency after his 15-year journey with the organization. Jake showed his dedication by claiming that he has offered Diaz a 2-fight deal, with the first being a boxing bout, and 6 months later, he plans to fight Diaz in the PFL Smart Cage. The YouTuber called out Diaz, saying he's down to fight him in his sport and that he thinks it takes courage to offer what he did. If that's not balls, then I don't know what is. I gotta admit, Paul's not here to play. First, he didn't back away from his claims that he'll protect the boxers and is also pretty serious about making his name in the MMA world. Well, after the news surfaced of the problem child signing, the MMA community had its fair share of opinions to give. Kyle Dawkins is out here claiming it's getting tough not to like Paul now. 50% revenue in fighter advocacy? Hate him or love him, he's making a name for himself in MMA, and good changes. While Big John McCarthy thinks the younger Paul sibling made a great move and showed his business savvy attitude, but not everyone is a Paul fan. Michael Bisping, for once, knows who can take down the 25-year-old. The UFC legend thinks Israel Adesanya, Anthony Smith, and Glover Teixeira have the tools to take down Paul. The YouTuber turned boxer has won 6 straight boxing matches, including 2 against Tyron Woodley and his most recent victory over UFC great Anderson Silva. Paul is still looking for more crossover fights with the promotion's top names, like Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor. The problem child has been the center of the backlash for his level of opponents, with many arguing that he should now face someone with natural boxing talents, such as his arch nemesis Tommy Fury. On the other hand, former UFC champion Michael Bisping feels even he has the boxing talent to beat Paul in the ring. It's highly unlikely that Adesanya would face Paul, as the two have been friends since Paul's emergence to popularity in combat sports. On the other hand, Smith and Teixeira are likely to be receptive to the chance, especially with the prospect of a lucrative payoff outside of the UFC. This was all about the problem child and the fighting community's reaction to his latest fight.
Champion Eddie Alvarez years ago.
Stories in big trouble.
And here comes O'Toole. There's a big left hand. Down goes.
Look at him finish his fight. TJ Dillashaw.
Sometimes he's sloppy. Oh my God! Oh my Lord!
Dean getting in there. He might stop this thing soon. That'll do it, kid.
No, absolutely. Like I say, one of his biggest assets.
Oh, what a shot! Great shot!
Oh!
High good head kick. Oh, God, Lehman's right. And Lehman goes.
Los costados de Ibarra. Otra vez. Ahora sí, Ibarra con la mano izquierda.
Really be hurt with Beterbiev all